Hi, and welcome to Hacker Chat. I'm your host, Kevin Poniatowski. And today we're going to talk about a way the hackers steal information out of our databases using a technique called SQL Injection. Now, it's very common for CGI parameters to be used as input into database queries. Our browsers will send that information to the web server. And we have our example here, baseballcards.com, and you notice at the end of that URL address is an item number, 1111. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that number is probably located in a database somewhere. It's some kind of a record. And that number, 1111, is probably going to be inserted into some kind of SQL query, querying the database for information. The problem is that embedding user input directly into a SQL query is a really bad idea. We can't trust client-side validation because of tools like web proxies, so we don't know if that input is malicious or not. So let's take an example of a SQL query where we're doing some kind of authentication. Now here we have a query where we're selecting username and password from a table called users, where username is some kind of input and password is some kind of input. What kind of malicious input can an attacker use here to hijack how this query is supposed to work? Instead of typing in a real password, the attacker here has input x single quote or 1 equals 1. Now, why did the attacker do that? Let's break that down. X single quote, that takes care of the password string. It closes it off. Now we also have or 1 equals 1. Well, 1 equals 1 is a true statement. And you or something with a true statement, it makes everything in that statement true. So now password equals true. This means that if the attacker has a good username and password equals true, they could log in as that user without needing to know the password. Let's look at another example. Using the same SQL query as before, the attacker has started out with single quote semicolon, finishing the original SQL query. And now they've added something else. Insert into users values ... The attacker here is going to insert their own username and password into the users table so they can log into this website as a regular user whenever they want to. The attacker is only limited by their ability using the SQL language. They can do whatever they want as long as that SQL query remains syntactically correct. And they're able to hijack it and then distort it into ways so the query will do what they want it to do. Now here's another little trick of the trade that our attackers will use. Say an attacker wants to attack a username field with SQL Injection, and they have one good username, for example, Sam. So they'll type into the username field Sam, single quote, dash dash. Now why the dash dash? Well, dash dash in SQL is the comment command. Everything after dash dash is to be ignored. So let's look at our new example query here. Our example query is select account data from account info where account ID equals username and password equals user input. So when the attacker types in Sam single quote dash dash, that changes the meaning of the query. Now let's look at the query. Select account data from account info where account ID equals Sam. No password is needed. This allows the attacker to get access to that data without a password. The SQL injection attacks I've showed you today are just the tip of the iceberg. Remember I mentioned that the hackers are only limited by their own ability to use the SQL command language. The SQL injection attacks that we're seeing today are much more complicated than what you've seen here, but we do have defenses that can prevent them. If you have any questions at all about what those defenses are against SQL injection, please feel free to email me at the email address I provide at the end of this clip. Well, thank you very much for coming to Hacker Chat and learning about SQL injection. Again, I'm your host, Kevin Poniatowski, and please stay safe.